Hello, LinkedIn friends. This is Dorie Clark. I am here with my homeboy, David Burkus, and we're excited to be chatting with you today. David is the author of a new audiobook that was recently released as a special from Audible, which is kind of cool, called Pick a Fight, which is not actually about attacking people, although we all might want to do that since we've been locked up in our homes for a long time. It is actually about purpose and about how your organization and your team can tap into their sense of purpose to achieve great things, which is a pretty cool topic for all of us. David is a longtime friend. He's written a lot of other really interesting books, Friend of a Friend, about networking, the myths of creativity, and wait, what's the other one? It's about unconventional management practices. Hold on. I can't quite read that, David.
Oh, sorry. Under new management.
Under new management. That's right. Soon I will have ready access to all of the Burkus oov in my brain. I came close this time. We'll see next time.
That's good. The trick is I'm really lazy when it comes to book titles. So what I just try and do is shoehorn fit it into some already cliche saying like friend of a friend, under new management, pick a fight. It's just,
It works, man. I'm down for that. But I'm so excited to have a chance to talk with you today. So folks who are tuning in here on LinkedIn, we would love to hear who you are and where you're from. So please type into the chat box, say hi, say where you're from. We'd love to get a sense of who's out there in the audience. But I'm especially happy to talk to David. I think the last time we saw each other in person was in November in London. We were both fortunate enough to be named on the Thinkers 50 list of the top 50 business thinkers in the world. So that was very exciting. Congratulations on that, David.
Oh no, congrats to you on being on the list. And you had a way better tuxedo than I had. I was just mad that I couldn't wear jeans to the event. So yeah,
the Oklahoman is just coming out, right? No cowboy boots either.
I filmed a video every day wearing jeans and a hoodie with a sport coat on because the very first video I was really lazy and was like, oh, I need something dressy, so I put the sport coat on over it, and then everybody had such a visceral positive reaction that I made it my thing for like 2 years. And at the event, I literally was like, I saw you and I saw Michael Bungay Sanya, our mutual friend there. And I literally was like, I went safe with just like a stupid tuxedo. I totally should have brought like a pure white hoodie with, and then put a bow tie around. I should have done something like that, but I didn't.
You would have been like the gangster rapper of Thinkers 50. Wow. Yeah. Next time, right? We've got 2021. So, all right. I just want to give a shout out to some of the folks who are here and joining us. This is great. We've got Phil coming in from Brooklyn. We have James from Chardon, Ohio. We've got Rolf. I don't know where Rolf is, but Rolf Mueller sounds pretty German. So hi, Rolf, probably in Germany. So Victor is here. Padma. Oh my goodness. Mindy from Cleveland. Linda from New York. Zvi is here. Our friend Zvi Band.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
awesome.
Hi, Zvi. That's great. Sachin is here. Denise is here. I love this. This is great to see all of you guys here. We have Samrat from New York. We have Robert coming in from Accra. That's great. Kim from Las Cruces, New Mexico. All kinds of amazing friends. So, David, I want to start out by asking you. So, you obviously came up with Pick a Fight and the concept of writing a book about purpose in the workplace before all of this madness, before coronavirus. It was relevant even then. But talk to me about your thought process. Why was this what you wanted to focus on, and how did this rise to the forefront of your consciousness?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, right? Because it's something that's obviously super relevant now, and people have been asking me that. But my proof that this is totally coincidental is that if I knew that all of this was going to happen, I wouldn't have released it in only audio book for people to listen to on the commute that they don't have anymore. Right.
So we're rebutting the myth here right now that you started the coronavirus. Right. You did not start it.
No, so what happened essentially is after Friend of a Friend, the book sort of ends with a look at organizational networks, teams, how we're all sort of influenced by the people around us. And so I started doing a deeper dive in and around teams. They've always been there in my work, from creative teams to how do you manage and lead teams to the network piece. And one of the things I found was kind of what really bonds and aligns teams fastest. We talk about, like, when we talk about team building, I'm sure you're used to the boring sort of, it's Val Buckman model, etc. There's a lot of, for lack of a better term, junk around team building as well, like ropes courses and trust falls that feel good but don't actually have any. So I started looking at around that, and one of the things I found was this concept of superordinate goals. When there is an outside threat or an outside goal that is so high it compels groups of people to work together, you see bonding at a much faster rate. So I started looking around for a lot of different ways that could be applied. And purpose is something that we sort of agree isn't. I'm sorry, Jason. I have no idea how many books are in my house. You didn't comment on the LinkedIn stream. You literally texted me because you're watching this. I should have been in Do Not Disturb, but since I'm riddled with ADHD, I just got disturbed. Anyway, the interesting thing about purpose, right? We've known about purpose it's important for, let's say, at least 20 years, right? We know that we need to be purpose driven. We know we need to start with why. We know that vision is important, all of those sort of things. In fact, one of the questions in the Gallup Q12, right? Like the most well-utilized study of employee engagement is, does the organization's mission and purpose, can I see that in my day-to-day job? But guess what? Employee engagement hasn't budged, right? So this then got me thinking about what's missing from all of our attempts at purpose. And I believe the sort of litmus test for whether or not you've identified a purpose, a mission that is not only motivating to individuals, but will bond a team together, is whether or not that mission answers the question, what are we fighting for? Not who are we fighting? Who are we fighting is a question about competitors. And in a world where people are going to have 5 to 7 careers in their lifetime, that doesn't necessarily matter. The odds are they're going to go to work for your competitor one day, right? And the odds are that you and your competitor are both working towards the same thing in the world or in the industry, et cetera. So that then became, what are we fighting for? What change in the world are we trying to make? And fight is, I get it, fight's a sort of violent way to think about it. I've gotten a little pushback on the idea of like, oh, we need less fighting in the world. I get what you're referring to. That's not what I'm referring to. What I'm referring to, and the reason that I choose fight, is that a fight has stakes. When people say they are fighting for something, when politicians say we're fighting for the little man or the little woman, they mean that there are stakes. It's not just that we want a better future. It's that if we fail, the future will be noticeably worse. And those stakes are what create that superordinate goal. So I've basically adopted that idea of the way to know whether or not you have a good, strong purpose is whether or not it answers the question, what are we fighting for? And if you don't, then there's probably some wordsmithing there. A caveat here, though, not every fight motivates the way you think it motivates. So the reason it's called Pick a Fight is you also have to choose your fight wisely.
What kind of a fight would be a bad fight?
So fights against competitors, we already saw. A lot of times people, when they say purpose and mission, they actually start talking about things like growth. Nobody cares about growth. Growth is the equivalent of being like, congratulations, we're now going 75 miles an hour instead of 70. Great, tell me where we're going, right? Specifically, when you look at the research on human motivation, I kind of categorize 3 different fights as a sort of template you can use. Every organization I've worked with, their purpose sort of fits into one of these fights. I call them the revolutionary fight, the underdog fight, or the ally fight. The revolutionary is simply, what do you want to change in your industry? Your company, by existing, your organization by existing, is pushing for a change in the way things are done. You have a revolution when everybody in the industry says this is an acceptable norm and we refuse to accept that any longer. The underdog fight is exactly what it sounds like, right? It's not just about being the little guy. It's about proving the haters wrong. It's about proving that you actually can stand up to it. And then the ally fight, quite simply, is it's not about our fight at all. It's actually about what our customers are fighting for, and we help them. We're the allies in this larger fight. It's the sort of, Adam Grant would call it the pro-social motivation piece. Can you see in your work how your work helps other people? But still, by being that ally, you're part of the fight as well.
That's really interesting, David. Thank you very much. And I'll just remind you guys, if you are watching, if you are tuned in, open a new browser window. You can go and follow me on LinkedIn and follow David on LinkedIn, Dorie Clark David Burkus. And if you follow us, you will get notifications about other LinkedIn Lives that we're going to be doing in the future. So if you like this, do that, and that will tune you in for future updates. So a question that I have for you, David, and soon we're actually going to be turning to audience questions. So guys, feel free to type your questions for David, or for me for that matter, who knows, into the chat box. You can type them in now. But I wanted to ask you, so how does the coronavirus factor into all of this? I mean, is that a fight that people can unite around? Is that sort of a common enemy, or does this current pandemic situation map into the purpose question at all? And if so, how?
Yeah, I mean, it most certainly does, right? We have, and I recorded a video about this about 2 or 3 weeks ago. What blows my mind is, I mean, I searched, and some of it is, in the 4 decades or so that I've been on the earth, I've never seen this. But then I started searching throughout of it, and I don't know that we've ever seen a moment in human history where the whole world is fighting against one enemy, right? I see a lot of news articles talking about how this is like we're looking at this like World War II. World War II was still half the world fighting the other half of the world, right? It wasn't the whole world fighting this totally unseen enemy. And what's amazing is to look at the ways people have responded, right? In medical research, for example, most of the time, researchers in every academic discipline worry about being scooped, right? So they keep their data close to their chest. They don't share it openly. In the last 6 months or last 6 weeks, we've seen people just, hey, we're running this clinical trial. Here are the results. We don't have time. I mean, we need to do peer review, but we're going to crowdsource peer review instead of putting it through this arcane system of secrecy so that we can get credit for the discovery later. Nobody cares. We don't have enough time for that, right? We're seeing industries pivot and start making PPE, start making ventilators, doing whatever they can to sort of serve this fight. Even the individual, like most people who are watching this because they're working from home right now. And the act of working from home is still the act of being an ally to the immunocompromised, the elderly communities, the people who are actually most at risk from this. There's a very sort of real sense of purpose just to doing things like that. It obviously creates a big question though for organizations, which is when this is all over, what are you going to do? Are we going to go back to sort of silos, politics, turf wars, competitor fights, knockdown, drag out fights for market share? Or are we going to realize how inspiring and motivating this fight has been when we win, and we will win this fight. When we win it, what do we go back to? What's the next fight that we decide to pick?
Yeah, it's so important. And I think what's probably on the mind of most people, David, who are watching this, they're leaders, they're managers, they're professionals who are trying to not only calm themselves in this really challenging and uncertain time, but also hopefully provide reassurance and motivation and build cohesion for their teams. So how do we do that in the current environment? Is it a good idea to sort of focus around COVID specific stuff, or do we lean more heavily on a kind of pre-existing purpose, the purpose that our organization was founded on? What could an individual manager or leader be doing right now to leverage the power of purpose more effectively?
Yeah, well, I would say that depends on whether or not your organization has an established purpose, right? There's a lot of companies that think they do, but what they really mean is they have a CSR/PR campaign where they just donate some money to something, right? You're a petrochemical company, but you have carbon offsets. That's not a purpose. That's just like trying to atone for your sins. That's different, right? So if you have an established purpose, sort of great. When I work with a lot of leaders on this idea, one of the things that I really try and emphasize though, is that I think in all of this talk about vision, mission, purpose, why, whatever you want to call it, there's a misconception, which is that great leaders throughout all of history, they don't cast a vision and get buy-in, right? So they don't say, here as a team, this is our purpose, and then try and convince people to come along. If you're founding a company, you might be able to get away with that when you're the only employee, and then people who you hire around you are drawn to that mission. But for most people, what they actually do is put to words the vision, the mission, the fight that is already written in people's hearts, that is already in their minds, right? And the great example, everybody loves to talk about Martin Luther King and the I Have a Dream speech, is this amazing sense of purpose and this amazing fight for equality. 600,000 people tuned in to listen to the I Have a Dream speech, and it is improperly titled. It should be the I Have a Dream and it's exactly like yours speech, right? Everybody heard their own dream in that speech. And that's what great leaders actually do. So what I encourage a lot of leaders when we're thinking about this purpose thing, the first thing we got to figure out is what actually will resonate with people. What is the type of fight that will actually resonate with them? So what I ask them to do is 2 simple questions of each of their people. I would not do this in a big group. I would do it one at a time with each of your people. Ask them 2 simple questions. What do we do here? And how does what you do help us do that? And one of 2 things usually happens. Either everybody's going to give you a really similar answer and is going to have a really clear line between what they do and how that helps the broader sense of purpose. And that's a pretty good indication that your organization already has a really great purpose. Unfortunately, that's the minority. The majority of people will give you answers all over the board who might not even know how their job helps that larger purpose. But in their answers, you can still get little clues. So if most people talk about the way they service customers, for example, then that's a clue that you might do best to pick an ally fight. If they talk about the injustices in the industry and how they're different for whatever reason, that's a clue that you might have the revolutionary fight. But it all starts with those two questions. What do we do here? And how does what you do help us do that? That's going to go a long way in helping an individual team leader, a senior leader, whoever is watching this, help them figure out what fight resonates most with their people. It's not about what fight they want to pick. It's about the fight that the people want to pick.
I think that's really interesting, David. Thank you for pointing that out and for giving us some tools and frameworks to be thinking about this, because I think often the misconception is that it's sort of this top-down thing. Oh, let me as the leader pick our purpose and then sell it to people. But it sounds like what you're saying is that in many ways it's the opposite. That it's kind of a more grassroots discovery process. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it can work if you're a small organization, if everybody has contact with you as the leader and you started because of that fight, then the people who are attracted to you, they already self-selected into that one. But most organizations, when they run into this situation where not everybody reports to the founder anymore, right, or are larger than, let's say, probably a dozen people, then they lose some of that touch. The individual founder's ability to say, this is why we started and this is our vision, goes by the wayside. So if you work for a multiple hundreds, thousands person organization, the odds are that those waters got really muddied. And so what starts is not saying, hey, this is our new purpose, because honestly, people roll their eyes. There's actually a great study by Adam Grant about the salience of mission, vision, and purpose. People don't receive it well coming from the leader. They receive it coming from the people who are affected by it. They receive it while coming from peers, et cetera. So your job as the leader is to figure out what will resonate most. And then you basically become the chief storyteller, the person who continues to tell the stories of customers who are helped, progress we're making on the industry, the way peers are sharing their purpose amongst each other. Your job isn't that top-down person. It's to just be in the scrum with other people, sharing the reason why we're in that scrum to begin with.
Yeah, thank you for that, David. That's great. And for folks who are tuning in, I'll just remind you, we have a couple of great questions that have come in from the audience, so we'll ask them in a second. But if you have a question for David or for me about purpose in your organization, or some of the other things that I think we're probably going to be talking about relatively soon, some of the topics of David's books, including creativity and networking and organizational change, send them in the comment box. We'd love to hear your comments. And also, of course, you can open up a new window in your browser and make sure that you're following me and following David on LinkedIn so that you can tune in and hear more updates from us on a regular basis. So David, a question came in from Amelia. She says, I'm a sales coach, and how can I apply the purpose mindset with my potential clients? How does that sort of figure in?
Yeah, well, I think depending on the individual clients, you need to have, if they're sales representatives, I mean, I don't know enough about her business. If they're sales representatives versus sales managers, there's two different routes we can go. If you're coaching sales leaders, sales managers, then I would encourage you to coach them to ask those two questions. What do we do here? How does what we do help us do that? And then your job is to draw a straight line between making more sales and the people who are helped if it's the ally fight, or the way that the industry is changing if it's the revolutionary fight, or just the way that we're proving the haters wrong if it's the underdog fight, right? If you're coaching individual sales reps, then we've got to engage in a little bit of what Amy Rosneski calls job crafting. How can we cognitively reframe the work that we do every day as whichever one will resonate most with us? The interesting thing I know from personal experience, anecdotal sample size of one experience, is that a lot of sales reps are motivated by that underdog fight idea. People don't actually respect us enough. They don't think that we are important enough. We're too low in the 4 stack rankings that come out every year. So that can be the one that really sort of motivates. And then we see the work that we do as proving those people wrong. If that's not the case, though, if they don't resonate with that, then we've got to figure out which of the other two it is. In a lot of cases, again, it can be that ally fight with the way in which your product or service is actually helping win that customer's fight. So I'll give you an example. One of my good buddies is fairly high up in a payroll processing organization. They're all sort of have the same model. They're all very sales rep driven. And in the midst of this COVID crisis, one of the things that all of them has done is reconfigure the reports that you can generate so that when the federal government asks for, we need this data for your PPP loan, right now you can just push a button and get all of that, right? That story should be being told to every sales rep in every one of these organizations, because it reiterates that here is who we actually help. It's not just about making more sales. It's about keeping people in business right now because you've already done that and made that sale.
That's really helpful. And I'm curious, I think part of Amelia's question was actually about customers, like not even just the internal sales managers or sales leaders, but how might you talk about your organization or your company's purpose with your customers? Does that make a difference to them?
Yeah. So again, it depends, in a sense, on what you've chosen your internal fight to be, right? But there are a lot of, if you're in one of those categories, you can find the revolutionary fight, for example, does a great job lowering cost per customer acquisition, right? One of the examples we talk about in the book actually is Ellevest. They're a robo-advisor. They're just like Wealthfront and Betterment and all of those, except that they basically looked at all of the existing algorithms and said, there's a gender bias here. And all of them are assuming a male's career, a male's pay, a male's life expectancy. And if you're a woman managing money for yourself, this is a big problem because you're gonna live longer, so your money needs to last longer. You might have career gaps for caregiving. You only get paid 77 cents on the dollar, so you have less money to work with to invest. And so they found that by being dedicated to that revolution, they've lowered their cost per customer acquisition. Another example in that revolution is my favorite cell phone case company ever, Pila, that makes a biodegradable cell phone case, right? Those customers turn into sort of raving fans, right? So the revolutionary fight can sort of help with that. Obviously, if you're in the ally fight, you're probably already a customer-centric organization, right? So it really depends on, again, internally. Most of my work around purpose has been around what inside the organization will most motivate employees. But I have seen that when you pick the right fight, customers are attracted or candidly repulsed from that, depending on whether or not they're the right customers, but you end up building a loyal following in the end anyway. So I'm not a marketing guy. I don't have a marketing background, so I don't say, here's how to project your fight to win clients. To me, it's about the customers first. And as I talked about in Underdog Management, if you take care of the customers that interact with the clients will be better served anyway.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that, David. That's really useful. So another question came in, and by the way, if you are watching this and you are enjoying it, if you think it's helpful, if you would like to share it with your colleagues on LinkedIn so that they can benefit from it as well, hit the share button. You can comment and like and share this conversation so that more people see it. So David, a question came in from Otto. He wants to know, David and Dorie, how might the notion of fighting for something go hand in hand with an abundance mindset? How do you think about those pieces, David? I mean, obviously now in the COVID crisis, I think a lot of people have a lot of concerns. Maybe the mindset has turned a little bit dark. How do we think about picking a fight for something and also embracing abundance and positivity?
Yeah. So again, depending on what the fight is, we can actually see an increase in sort of pro-social behaviors that will drive that abundance mentality instead of a scarcity one. One of the things that's interesting, whenever there is a crisis like this, there are scare stories because they drive clicks about how hoarding is going to happen and this is going to happen. And yeah, I haven't been able to buy toilet paper in 6 weeks. But I also realized that I would contribute to that problem because if I saw any, I would snatch it up too quickly. But we also know that in natural disasters, we see increases in sharing, right? So 9/11 or Katrina or any of the recent tornadoes that we've seen, like in Nashville, increase pro-social behaviors too. So the real question to me isn't necessarily, does it lead to a bigger abundance mentality? It does. The real question is whether or not we're going to help it do that. By what stories are we going to share? Are we going to click share on that story about the car that was stolen or the toilet paper crisis? Or click share on that story about the Canadian scout who 3D printed ear guards for nurses in his area so that the paper masks don't wear on the back of their ears? Like, which story are you going to share? Because that matters in whether or not this particular crisis helps push that abundance mentality or push that scarcity mentality. We are unfortunately fortunately or unfortunately, we are herd creatures, right? And the ironic thing is we all also have this free will where we can choose what we share, and that will influence the herd and compound over time.
Yes, absolutely. We have all heard plenty in recent weeks about exponential growth, and there's a lot of things, not just a virus that can grow exponentially.
Yeah.
Our behavioral choices can have exponential impacts. So I think that's really interesting. So a question came in. This is actually from my pal Caitlin in Oakland. Caitlin wants to have a question about workflow. She says, "I'm
Okay.
curious about your both of your current workflows, since you're both authors. Are you currently blocking off time in your week to engage in focused, uninterrupted writing? Is it easier or harder for you to carve out the headspace for the deep work that involves insight and reflection? How is this playing out for you, David?"
Yeah. So I kind of accidentally got recruited into both social and deep work. So about 3 weeks ago now, maybe 4 weeks ago, Amy Cuddy started this thing because she was in quarantine. She and her husband thought they had COVID, and she was in quarantine. And she started this thing called the Quarantine Writing Hour that I don't know. I don't know if it's because I'm a millennial or not or whatever, but there were some tech challenges that she needed solved. And I just started, texting her or direct messaging her on Twitter, which turned into texting, which turned into designing a logo and figuring out a couple other things, right? And so she's done an amazing job. We meet every day at 11 a.m. A different author posts a write. I'll go write for a while. And then at the end, she does a live stream with that author. Now, candidly, I don't actually listen to the live stream because what I started doing with two other friends of mine, and Dorie, you could join us on this if you want. What I started doing is jumping in a Zoom room with two other friends right at 11 a.m. We watch the writing tip thing that gets posted at the beginning, and then we heads down and write, and we come up at the bottom of the hour at the 30 to chit chat for a little bit, and then we do another sprint. And then usually I end up having to watch the replay of that live stream. But that's been my approach, actually, is when I need that deep work, what I actually need is someone to hold me accountable. And so just seeing that little head in the corner of the room of somebody who's looking at me through my webcam, that if I were gone or being distracted or whatever would call me out on it, has helped tremendously. And as an extrovert, it's weird because it's deep work that is also social. So that's what I've been doing though, Dorie. What have you been doing?
Whoa, that's hardcore, David. That's great. Yes, and actually, I have a friend here in New York who has a company based on that same principle. It's called Focus Mate, and basically, what you do is you're kind of in the equivalent of a Zoom room where they match you up with a stranger, and you both do a kind of deep work project.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, it's an
Like
interesting
roulette, but for focus. I like it.
Exactly.
It's an old school reference, by the way.
Oh, I know. It's like chat roulette, but with fewer dick pics. So this one's safe for work, people. But yeah, for my sort of deep work, I have been doing a lot of it. Actually, I have written. I do a lot with online courses, and I have written 3 of them since the pandemic started. I created two courses for LinkedIn Learning, and I created one for a company that I work with called Exec Online. So that is, each of those. I mean, if we're mapping it out into word count, that's probably about let's call it 20,000 words. So maybe half. A little less than half of a book, you could say, I've created.
Well, Pick a Fight's only 20,000 words, so we can call it a book if we want.
There we go. I guess you could say I wrote an audiobook.
There you go. But, did you write and film them, or just you wrote them and then when this is all over, you'll get into LinkedIn Studios?
So for the Exec Online course, we filmed it. I was very nervous that they were going to shut down New York before we were able to do it. So I pushed them, and we moved up the filming date twice because I'm like, people, we've got to do this. And so we filmed it just a few days before the lockdown started, and got it all done in the bank. It's running now. For LinkedIn Learning, actually, as you know, David, typically you fly to California to film these courses, which is not.
Well, I don't know because they've never called me, Dorie.
Oh, a vast oversight. Clearly they need to correct that ASAP. But so yes, you fly to Carpinteria, California, and you do it, and not happening. So actually, in the next 10 days or so, we did a pilot last week, and it was a little complex and arduous, but we figured it out. And so in about 10 days, I am going to be filming these 2 courses from my house live. So
green screen and the whole thing.
I don't actually have a green screen. No, it's going to kind of look like this. The big question is how many cat cameos are going to appear. This is going to be interesting. They were like, well, could you put the cats in the bedroom? I'm like, dude, I don't know how that's going to go.
Not if you don't want them to start screaming on mic. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been trying to convince them. I'm like, look, spotting the cat is going to be like, an Easter egg in a video game. I actually think that learners will enjoy it more. I think they'll be like, the human's okay, but the cat is amazing. So that's what I'm thinking. But yeah, so I have been doing a lot of deep work actually. I've been pretty busy with podcasts and LinkedIn lives and things like this, but the weekends, I mean, hey, surprise, I don't really have a lot going on the weekends, so I've been diving into deep work during then. So great question, Caitlin, thank you for that. And I'll just mention one of the things that I've actually been spending time on is creating a LinkedIn newsletter. It is completely different content than my regular email newsletter, and if any of you guys would like to subscribe to it, you can go to the custom URL, go to DorieClark.com/LinkedIn, and you will access my newsletter. You hit the blue subscribe button and you will get it in your LinkedIn mailbox. So please check that out. Every single week we'll get new original content for that. So a question, David, that came in is actually from Olivia. She wants to know, how can we influence the way we're working for better aligning our purpose with all of the adjustments that COVID entails? It seems like a lot of things have been changed or reshuffled in the current environment. Is there a way to kind of merge these things together?
Yeah. So when we look at job crafting, Amy Wrzesniewski's big idea that I referenced before, which is essentially, to me, the manual for how you can realign your work to fit inside that fight. There is cognitive reframing, which is sort of how you see how the work that you does helps win that fight. And then there's what she calls task reframing, which is how do you adopt new tasks that make you feel more purpose, or how do you drop other ones, right? So the example she uses a lot of times is this janitor in a hospital who would treat in the ICU patients that were in comas and would move the pictures around or move the flowers to a little more sunlight, et cetera, just in case that you're able to perceive those things and it helps with recovery. That he saw that as it's not in his job description anywhere, right? But it's something that he saw he could add on to his task that would help him be more aligned with that ally fight, right? So we can do that. The other thing, I'm actually a big proponent of, I believe it was Marcus Buckingham that first popularized the idea that there is no job listing on monster.com for dream job, right? The people who have gotten into what they would call their dream job didn't apply for it, they built it. And the way that they built it was by adding on those tasks like I talked about, but also experimenting with removing certain tasks that actually drain them. And now is actually a really, really good time. A lot of managers that I've worked with in the last couple of weeks have talked about how there's sort of a surplus in time versus activities. We find a way to fill 8 to 5 in the office because we have to. But when we separate presence from productivity, we find people can actually get the productive things that move the ball forward done, and we're paying less attention to those other things. So that would be the thing I would encourage. If you feel something that's not aligned with your own sense of like, this is how my job fulfills that purpose, is there somebody else who might even be better at it that you could also help share that task with? Or could you even, and this is what Marcus Buckingham used to recommend, could you even just stop doing it for a week or two and see if people even notice? Right? I've been in a lot of situations where I have this sort of whatever report that I'm supposed to do. And when I stop doing it, I realize no one actually reads the report. So I guess I don't have to do it anymore. Right? So those are those sort of situations. What can you add to those tasks that will be those constant reminders? And then there may even be things you can remove from your life. And now is actually the really good opportunity, because we're all relearning what roles and responsibilities we should expect from our peers in this time. And when we get back to the new normal, we have an opportunity right now to change what those roles and responsibilities are when we get back to the office. Really that time to look at that task crafting piece as well.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree, David. That's really helpful. And my pal Deb Grubel from Stanton, Virginia, from Mary Baldwin University, shout out there, asked for a shout out to all her Navy shipmates on the USNS Comfort, helping with the COVID-19 battle in New York. She says, remember those who have a tight community with a purpose. Absolutely. That is absolutely a perfect example. Oh, do you have a prop? You got a prop there, man? What do you got?
I have been, speaking of her, I have been privileged in times to speak at the Naval Academy, the Naval Postgraduate School, and to our mutual friend Sean Heritage's Navy Cyber Defense Command, all places that are very purpose and mission. They know what the fight is, and they're aligned with it. And what I love, especially, is that the fight now is, again, not about sort of competitors, not about this larger thing. It's about keeping us all safe, which is what their fight's always been, but it's never been more salient.
Yes. All right. Way to over-index with the Navy memorabilia, man.
You like that? Well, I actually told Sean in your comments that I was going to show off that I still have the coin he gave me. So there you go.
I love it. I love it. That's great. Well, so we had a question come in from Steven, our pal Steven from San Diego. He says, Dorie and David, what is your approach or mindset for selling services like courses and the like these days? Obviously, this is a time when a lot of companies, a lot of individuals are a little bit paralyzed because we don't know what's coming down the pike. Some people might even wonder, is it appropriate to sell things? Is that tacky? Or, I mean, business has to go on to a certain extent, but how do we be sensitive with this? And how does that tie into purpose and mission? How are you thinking about this, David?
Yeah. So, everything in my business is either basically free or what Tim Ferriss would call ultra premium, right? So there's either a book that costs less than $20, or there's a keynote or a workshop that costs, 1,000x that, right? So obviously you can't sell that second one, but I've never really felt like telling people about Pick a Fight, for example, is selling, because it's a bargain. It's a $6 audio book that talks about how to properly align your team and get them motivated. That's a bargain. I've never really felt bad on that. What I have done on the speaking and on the consulting side is I basically in this moment tried to look for a ton of value. I mean, to be quite candid, to sort of show that value and how I can help. I wrote a book called Friend of a Friend, which is all about the science of social networks and what that means for our own individual networking. It's not a networking advice book. It's a here's how networks work book. Candidly, I would prefer to not be talking about that right now because I've got Pick a Fight and I would prefer to be talking about Pick a Fight. But right now, one of the biggest things people are wondering is we're all at home. How are we going to keep our professional networks active? How are we going to use this time for that? And so what I did is I went to every past and current client of mine. And I basically said, hey, I built this landing page. You can actually see it if you go to davidburkus.com/networking remotely or networking-remotely. And it was basically, hey, I'll do this for free for your team if you're just looking for content. Learning hasn't stopped, even though in-person learning has for a time. I'll just do this for free. It's based off of Friend of a Friend. What can we do from our homes that'll help us grow our professional network, that'll help our sales reps keep in touch with clients, et cetera? What can we do in this moment? And I'm not going to charge you for it. Later, I mean, I'm going to trust that down the road when there's an opportunity to work together, you're going to remember me for sure. But more important right now is just coming through. This is the value I have to offer you right now. It has nothing to do with what I'd want to be talking about, which is Pick a Fight, but it is the most valuable thing for your team. And so here you go. I'll do it for free. We did one of those just 2 days ago. It was fantastic. It was a great hour-long set on what can we do when we're all here to keep that contact with weak ties, dormant ties, that sort of thing. So that's what I've been doing. I'm curious because you are a lot more, you have a way better, for lack of a better term, value ladder, right? There's things in between your books and hiring you in person that I don't have. So what's your approach been?
Yeah, thank you, David. And it's really interesting to hear how you're thinking about it and the great things that you're doing. The way that I'm thinking about selling now, I mean, certainly for the first 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks of the pandemic, same as everybody else. I was not actively selling anything because people just were trying to wrap their arms around things. I mean, you can't make a buying decision when literally you don't even know what tomorrow is going to look like. I think things were changing so fast that it would be a very hard proposition for anyone because you can't make projections, budgetary or otherwise, even life projections, if you don't know what's coming down the pike. But I think we are now reaching a point in the pandemic where, terrible though it is, I think people are beginning to feel like the ground is solid enough underneath them that they can make plans. The plan might be a sucky plan, like, oh, I'm just going to be at home for the next 3 months or, whatever it is. But they're beginning to get a sense of, okay, I can at least think about tomorrow. I can think about next week. I can think about next month. And so, for instance, I had a number of engagements, I'm sure you probably did too, in March, in April, that got postponed. And it was like, well, okay, what, question mark, what are we doing? But now I'm starting to see clarity. I had last week a couple of clients come back to me, and I was wondering, like, are they going to cancel? What are they going to do? They have decided to move forward in a relatively rapid fashion, but they want to do it virtually. And so okay, they, it's not going back to normal immediately, but they feel like they have enough latitude that they can make some sort of decisions. So I'm seeing a lot of that. In terms of how I'm thinking about marketing and selling, I really want to push. I don't think that we should be pussyfooting around selling things. I think that sometimes people have a kind of a delicate sensibility where there's like the internet outrage kind of thing about, it's so inappropriate in a time like this to sell, and blah, 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 blah. And I really want to push back against that. Because I think, first of all, one way or another, whatever strictures we have to abide by as citizens in terms of a public health sense, business has to go on. This is what drives our country. This is what drives our economy. This is what makes our I say our country, but I mean the world, great, is that people are sharing ideas, that they're growing, they're developing, they're bettering themselves. And I think that if we step back and say, oh, I'm not allowed to sell now, it's not appropriate, that is letting the terrorists win. And we've got to say, no, you know what? People don't have to buy. We have no guns to anyone's head to say, oh, you have to buy this. Plenty of choice there, but I don't think that we need to censor ourselves. I think if we lead with it and say, look, this is not going to be appropriate for everyone. There's plenty of things that are not appropriate for everyone. But I will tell you, David, in the very email that I sent to my email list, talking about doing the session with you today, which is a free session. I think it is important to acknowledge people are in lots of different places. I mean, so many people, 22 million Americans have lost their jobs in the past 3 weeks. It's stunning. It's horrifying. And I hate that. So for some people, paying for anything, not a good move, right? And so I want to make sure that I'm offering lots of free opportunities. So we're having this live stream. I'm having a live stream with our mutual friend, Whitney Johnson, next week. So lots of resources available at no cost to anyone. But there are some people for whom it actually is a more important time than ever to buy things and to do professional development. And so in that very same email, I said, look, not for everyone, but if this is a time when you're thinking that it actually may be a good idea to invest in yourself, to invest in your strategy and thinking about your strategy, I have a new offering. I used to do, I still do, just not literally at the moment, these half-day in-person strategy sessions, which cost $7,500. They're in New York City. Over the past few years, people have flown in from all over, all over North America to come to these sessions. But it's just obviously not happening right now. So I decided that at least for a limited time, I'm going to be doing $5,000 virtual strategy sessions with people. And, the narrative might be, oh, nobody's buying. 5 people wrote to me in the past few days saying that they want to do that. And so I'm setting it up now. So I think if you make your options available for the right people, it will be useful and not be perceived as, being crass in some way.
Yeah, I think the difference too is whether or not what you're selling is aligned with a strong sense of purpose and mission. Not to be seeing everything through the lens of pick a fight, but recognized expert. I've seen the back end of that. I think there's an interview with us in part of that course.
Oh, indeed there is. Yes.
Met the people who have started writing for major publications and who have ended up on the Thinkers 50 radar because they took your course. So that helps people, right? Especially if candidly, if you're one of those 22 million that are unemployed and you're like, what do I do now? A ton of your content, both free and what you sell, is hugely helpful for that, right? On the contrast, I got an email from my Acura dealer about how Acura is keeping. I don't care. I really don't. I got an email from American Airlines saying, hey, we're going to extend your Admirals Club membership. Great, that's good to know, but I don't need to know that right now, right? So it depends on whether or not you're offering that solution and whether or not what you've been selling is in line with, again, one of these things that are really a strong, here's what we're fighting for. If you're just selling widgets, now's probably not the best time. But if what you actually do helps change lives or change the industry, et cetera, then now's still a great time.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. So I want to get to Linda's question that came in, but before we do, we had a request, David, for you to repeat your link where you mentioned the social network
Oh,
resource.
yeah. So it's davidburkus.com/networking -remotely or hyphen remotely, whatever that is. And I'll put it in the comments for when this video gets archived on LinkedIn. I'll put it in there too for folks.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, David. So Linda's question came in, Linda from Nashville, and she says, how do you engage people in the grassroots mission effort when they're conditioned to look to the leader for the vision? I think that's a really important question. How do we get people to, sort of step up and feel empowered around that?
Yeah, well, you can still look to the leader. The difference is that the leader's job is the chief storyteller, right? So you can still look to that leader, but the leader's job is to point to, if you're in the ally fight, for example, customers who have been helped, et cetera. Like, let me give you a great example. Dorie, I don't know if you know this guy, but I've had the privilege of, for the last 2 years, knowing a man named Jesse Cole, who is the owner of the Savannah Bananas baseball team.
I have met Jesse. Yes.
So Jesse is the owner of a minor league baseball team, right? They're college, the Coastal Plain League. They play college, but they're renowned now around the world for the way that Jesse has been committed to fans. If you ask him what he's fighting for, say we're fighting for the fans to have an amazing experience. So, for example, instead of nickel and diming them like most baseball stadiums do, you buy a ticket. It includes all your food, everything except alcohol, basically, so that we're not trying to nickel and dime you. They put on all sorts of different entertainment, whatever. Jesse has played into that Savannah Bananas thing, right? Jesse
he always wears yellow, right?
He wears like a yellow tuxedo with top hat. He needs a cane, but I'll talk to him about that later. So it's impossible not to be looking at Jesse. But when you look at Jesse will tell you the story of, for example, the father of 4 kids whose wife passed away a couple years ago, and the Savannah Bananas experience is sort of the one time during their period of mourning where the kids were happy and it wasn't on him to worry about their emotions. He could just trust that they would take care of him. He'll tell you about the man who used to come to their 100-year-old baseball stadium during segregation and have to sit in the colored seats, and now has a front row seat because the Savannah Bananas basically said, this is your seat. We're sorry you were treated that way, but forever when you come to the stadium, you are front row center. So people will still look at the leader, but the leader's job is to give them those stories about how they're winning the fight or how the customers are winning the fight. The leader's job is to tell those stories. It's not just to say, this is what we're about, et cetera. It's not about that leader. Your job becomes chief storyteller.
Yeah, David, thank you for sharing that. I think that's really useful. And I just want to mention for folks, I was alluding earlier to my newsletter. If you want to subscribe to that, this is my email newsletter where you'll get a message just about every week telling you about LinkedIn Lives that I'm doing like this and other resources. You can get that at DorieClark.com/subscribe. And in the meantime, please make sure to follow me and follow David on LinkedIn so you can be connected with us there. And David, I wanted to check in with Carol's question. Carol says, job crafting and job redesign are good ways to help people align their personal purpose with their organization's purpose. And it's so important for job satisfaction and retention. But she says, the issue I see is that many people have a hard time getting clarity regarding their personal purpose, which makes it difficult to align with an organization's. How do you deal with that? What's your take?
Yeah, candidly, I don't know that I'm that personal purpose guy. Like I can tell you in writing the book, I thought a lot about that on a personal level. Me personally, I'm highly motivated by the Underdog Fight. Dorie, you probably know that about me. I love it when I get the chance to prove haters. I mean, I was born in Philadelphia, right? We're the underdog city. Our greatest sports hero is a fictional character who loses a boxing match, right? We're the underdog city. So there is that element of seeing that kind of personal fight. But I think there's a lot of people that have looked into concepts like Ikigai and even like cynics start with why. Like a lot of people ask me, okay, how is pick a fight similar or different than start with why? Start with why to me is actually, even though it's an organizational leadership book, it's a very personal concept of what your personal why is. In fact, Cynic even sort of pivoted and talked about when you're talking about organizations, you have what he calls the just cause, which is great. That's basically the revolutionary fight. So there's that element to it. And honestly, there's people who are way more brilliant than me on that personal thing. What I can tell you is that I think there's an opportunity in the fact that because people don't have a very clear sense of their personal purpose, figuring out by asking questions like, what do we do here? And then paying attention to the language people use, you're actually helping them draw out what's important. If they talk about customers, then obviously that's important to them. If they talk about the change they're making in the industry, then obviously that's important to them. So in some sense, you are helping that discovery. I don't think you can take it to completion the way, again, folks like Ikigai or Stu Friedman and the total leadership idea, I think is a phenomenal resource around that. I don't think we can take it fully that way, but we do begin the process of introspection by trying to find out that organizational fight as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So David, Ruba has a question. Ruba wants to know, do you think this is the time to innovate something new, new to business or new to your business to cope with the current bad circumstances? What would you say about launching a new product, launching a new service right now?
Yeah, I would say the question is whether or not you have time for the pause. So one of the things I've seen, and this is probably more in line with stuff that I talk about in Under New Management, is that we've been very reactionary to everything without taking that pause. And I get it. Some situations, the restaurant industry, for example, is really, really tight margins. And I don't know if they had time for the pause. But if they did, they probably would have found solutions beyond just, oh, now we do home delivery and now we do takeout orders, right? They probably could have talked about like, what if we sold meal kits for our signature dish and then you could buy that along with videos showing you how to cook it at home, right? Or what if we did teleconference catering? We used to have this private room for 10 people. What if we said we'll deliver the same meal to 10 different addresses and we'll set you up with a Zoom room where you can all eat together, trying the different courses of the meal together, right? You could have found those things if you had time for that little pause and then to go, okay, what are all the steps involved in how we create value? Unfortunately, what I'm seeing is a lot of organizations are just going, okay, here are the constraints. How do we keep doing what we're doing inside of those? And, that's great. Candidly, I think this is going to be something that we are in the long tail of history, something that is temporary. I know it doesn't feel like that right now, but like 1957 influenza epidemic killed 116,000 people and no one remembers it, right? So if you want to go back to business as usual, you can. If you have time for that pause, though, now is an amazing time to go, what are all the ways we can create value and how can we sort of deconstruct those and create offerings outside of those? That to answer your question, I think is a phenomenal opportunity. The question is whether or not you are going to take the time to do it. So yeah, now's the time. Do you have the time to do it?
Yeah, so powerful, David. I love the idea of taking a pause and really discovering that. And this ties in, my most recent book, of course, was called Entrepreneurial You, which is about how to develop multiple streams of income in your business. And one of the things that it's sort of a drum I've been beating for a while, but I think is particularly salient now, is the idea of creating counter-cyclical elements to your business. So, for instance, in my own life, I do a lot of corporate speaking. That is a fantastic thing to do when there is a booming economy, but obviously not really a thing now. Many of those have been converted to webinars, so there's still a little bit, but it's not nearly the same thing or not nearly the same volume while we're dealing with this pandemic. Or frankly, I was not expecting a pandemic, but I was expecting that at some point there would be an economic downturn. And
every 6 to 8 years, people forget that recessions happen every 6 to 8 years.
Yeah, exactly. So, I was expecting, okay, conference business is going to dry up for a while. So I started, about 6 years ago now, 2014 was my first foray, over-indexing into online courses. And to a point that you were making earlier, David, the online courses, which, some of them are available sort of in a enterprise subscription model like LinkedIn Learning. Some of you guys who are watching this might be subscribers to LinkedIn Learning, but also I have ones that I sell directly that I've created, and those things, the Recognized Expert course, which is the flagship course, or the Rapid Content Creation Masterclass, which is about how to write better and more quickly and more effectively. Those are things that while they are useful to anybody that's interested in the material, even during good times, I think actually during bad times they become more crucial. People begin to see them as perhaps more mandatory because, oh my God, I really need to reinvent myself, or I really need to get my expertise recognized because that means the difference between being able to be successful in my company or successful in my entrepreneurial venture or not. So I think that's a piece of it as well.
Yeah. Oh no, I totally agree with that. And like I said, your content is right in line with that. I mean, I figured this out in my own life. I unfortunately didn't have Dorie to walk me through this whole process of creating content and whatever. But one of the things I found is that the best internal strategy in terms of your own organization and getting promoted, getting policies, being recession proof, et cetera, is actually an external strategy. To the extent that the external environment knows you as a recognized expert, your internal work is safer and you develop more political power anyway. So yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. It's a vitamin in good times, but it is a painkiller in bad times for sure.
Amen, brother. That's right. And as your university pals would relate to, one of the tenets here is you are never a prophet in your homeland.
Yeah.
And if you are in a company, if you are in a particular setting, it's just like, oh, well, that's just David, but then they're like, oh, geez, David's on the Thinkers 50 list. Oh, geez, Dave, has, a million people see his TED Talk or whatever. All of a sudden.
No, you're exactly right. No, I mean, Delta In-Flight Entertainment started carrying the TED Talk, and that's when people inside the university, oh, that non-peer-reviewed research thing you've been doing is actually paying off, isn't it? Like, yeah, it's been paying off for a while. Where you been?
Absolutely. Well, we're coming into the denouement. We have about 5 more minutes left with you, and guys who are watching.
Good term. Sorry.
Thank you. Yes, all those English lit classes pay off, right? But we're so happy that folks are with us and watching and viewing. And again, if you'd like more people to see this, spread the word. Please hit share on your LinkedIn feed. You will look smarter and have more social proof based on you sharing this video. So we invite you to do that. And in the meantime, I will ask Agata's question. She wants to know, David. I have a question related to sales. I do reach out to clients sometimes via cold emails or cold calls. Do you have any idea how this approach could be adapted in these current situations? This is one of these sort of tricky things in pandemic times. Do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, my personal thought is I would scale it down a bit. I think now really is the time to demonstrate that you care about the totality of your current clients, and you will end up growing business from them. And I think the question on cold outreach is whether or not you can provide this person something of value sort of right now, no obligation, no nothing, right? It goes back to this purpose and fight question. Do you have something that'll help them win the fight they're going through right now? If they do, push send. If you don't, you should probably think about less direct means of getting out to them, right? If you do, take whatever you offer and put it out as content that they can kind of opt into, as opposed to you reaching out to them and that sort of thing. But again, if you've got something that'll help them win the fight, if you understand the fight that right now, and you have something that'll help them win that, right? Don't be my Acura dealer. But if you can help them win that fight, then yeah, go ahead and I would make sure you're spending the majority of your time making sure that your current clients, the current people you serve, are taken care of, because they're the ones that are going to remember you. The cold outreach people won't even remember you if they just delete the email, but clients will remember you when all of this is over.
I'm gonna +1 that, David. If we take nothing else from this conversation, it's don't be David's Acura dealer. Don't be that. Don't be that person. No. So we got time for one more question, David. This one's from Tamara or Tamara. I'm not sure which. Sorry in advance. But Tamara/Tamara wants to know, how does charismatic leadership play into organizational effectiveness? What do you think of that?
Ooh, yeah. Now we're getting nerdy on me. Now I get to use doctorate for once. So charismatic leadership. So here's my thing. I'm actually not the biggest proponent of charismatic leadership. Charismatic leadership is that sort of ability to inspire, that ability to generate, that ability to tell the fight that you're doing. But I'm a bigger fan of transformational leadership. And when we think about transformational leadership, we have that inspiration piece, but what we also have is individual consideration, right? Which is one of the big components of transformational leadership, which is whether or not people feel that the leader actually understands their unique situation, whether or not they are individually considering this. It's not enough to just tell a grand story and be inspiring. Honestly, one of my favorite examples of transformational leadership in action is Barack Obama. A lot of people said charismatic leadership, and I kept saying, no, because I'm talking to people that believe that Barack Obama really does care about how they get a cell phone, right? And about it. So, and I know that's a dumb example, but like really does care about the specifics of what's going on in their life, their ability to manage a budget and whatever. That's transformational leadership, the ability to do that. And it's well established, the line between transformational leadership and organizational effectiveness is well established in the research literature. The reason I emphasize this, by the way, is that when you have individual consideration, you will almost always fight a fight that resonates with your people. When you just have charismatic leadership, you can end up leading people to a fight they didn't want. My example of a charismatic leader, for example, would be every dictator ever. There's a reason they came to power on the strength of their charisma, but they were more thinking about themselves and that movement than the individuals, and they ended up leading people into a fight they didn't want to fight.
Yes, so useful. Thank you for that framework and that distinction, David. That's great. So, guys, if you enjoyed this conversation, to find out more, to keep in touch, please follow me on LinkedIn. Follow David. You can open up a new window right now and hit the follow button. David, for people who are interested in you and people who are interested in your new book, Pick a Fight, where can they learn more?
So davidburkus.com would probably be the best place. I'll throw that link when we go back to the archived on this. My name is really weird and there's not a lot of us out there. So the domain was still open. Burkus is Burkus. So davidburkus.com is probably the best place.
All right. Amazing. David, thanks for spending a great hour. And to all of you who watched us and interacted with us live, thank you so much. It's great to have you here and to continue the conversation during these challenging times. We can all use a dose of purpose more than ever. So thanks so much, everybody, and take care.